Everyone's talking about AI, but how are students actually using it? Over the past few years, tools like ChatGPT have started to shape how people search for information, write applications, and make choices about university. But what does that actually look like in practice? More and more prospective students are asking AI questions like, which universities offer this degree, or what grades do I need to get in? And the answers they get back aren't always right. So what happens when applicants start treating AI as their first port of call instead of the university website? And how should universities respond? I'm Gareth Hughes, and this is the University Comms podcast. Today I'm joined by Flo Vincent, who works in the Prospective web team at the University of Edinburgh. She's recently explored how applicants are using AI to find degree information, what they're trusting, what they're not, and what we should be doing about it. Hi, Flo. So delighted you're joining us today on the University Comms podcast. Really interesting and timely conversation about how AI is and isn't changing the way that applicants apply to university. Before we get into the kind of conversation about the research that you and the team have done, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, about the team that you work in Edinburgh?
Sure. So I'm Flo Vincent. I'm a content designer and I work in the Prospective student web team. So we are a part of communications and marketing at the University of Edinburgh. But we have a little bit of overlap with our student recruitment and admissions team as well, because as the name would suggest, our remit is sort of content for applicants. So people who are thinking of applying to one of our programs or who are in the process of applying or who've maybe, got an offer or they're waiting to hear. So we have two sites, one for undergraduates, one for postgraduates, and we also manage our degree finders. So that's like our degree program listings. And we offer about, I can never remember the exact number, but it's over 900 degree programs for undergrads and postgraduates.
Wow.
It's quite a big job overseeing all of that. But we're an interdisciplinary team. So we have a performance analyst, we have a user experience specialist, we have a technical lead, and we're all about human-centered design. So we're all about going back to our applicants and asking them what it is that they need and putting content in front of them and testing it with them, because we always just go back to the users. So that's a little bit about our team.
And I guess kind of that user-centered approach is why you began to look at how applicants were using AI. So was that why? So what was the reason kind of behind the project, the research that you've done? Where did it come from?
I think we kind of had AI on the brain. Like, I feel like
who doesn't at the moment?
Exactly. It's just everywhere at the moment. And now our team manager, Neil, he was very keen for us to dig into it on our side and see how we could potentially use it in our work. Because we, as expected, we spend a lot of time proofreading, copy editing, correcting content that's been written by sort of academics around the university to kind of bring it in line with our editorial style, make sure that it's accessible, inclusive, all of that stuff. So Neil was very keen for us to look at these tools and whether we could use them to help us do that. So we were doing that at the time. And then this overlapped with us doing some usability testing on our new undergraduate degree finder. So our team had designed like a new sort of template program page, and we were testing that to see how well it was performing, basically. And my manager, Lauren, was like, why don't we ask these people, as we're doing these usability tests, if they used AI in the application process? Because we were talking to actual applicants, like high school kids, and we don't often get the chance to do that.
Yeah.
So we thought, let's just ask them a couple of questions and see, are they using it? Because that would be an interesting insight. And as we started to gather these insights, I started to think, okay, this could be like a piece of work. And how could we spin this into a sort of larger piece of work? And it kind of went from there, really.
So what were those initial insights then that kind of sparked that thought that, there could be more to this?
Well, it's pretty simple conversations we were having. We, at the start of these usability tests, we just have asked people, what are you studying or what are you looking to study and, things like that. And we just sort of tacked on these questions like, when you've been searching for degrees in universities, have you used AI at all? And most people were sort of like, no, seemed sort of quite surprised to be in that initial round. And it was quite a small batch of people, but were like, no, not really. It hadn't occurred to me to use it. But a couple had. And enough people had used it and had used it in ways that were kind of interesting that it just made us think maybe there is a little bit more here. And the other thing was that once I started to sort of look into it from the other side, like trying to imagine, okay, if I was an applicant searching ChatGPT, what would I be looking for? That's when it really started to spark my interest, because the results I was getting back, putting in these searches, were quite concerning. And
Right.
so that when we started to realize that maybe these people who are using AI for this process aren't getting reliable information back, that's when it really sort of piqued our interest.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's the case in so many different facets of life now, isn't it? That because I know I'm guilty of this. Like I will just go to ChatGPT now and use it in the way that I used to use Google, and I will just assume that what is returned. Obviously, for kind of big life decisions, I wouldn't do this, but I use it so many times a day now that you just sort of take it for what it says. So yeah, interesting. So that's kind of where it started. What did you do there?
So we did that sort of an initial round of talking to people, and I think that first batch was about 19 people, but that wasn't really enough to go on. We have a user experience specialist, as I said, on our team, Pete, and I sat down with him and we sort of spoke about how could we talk to some more people. So one of the things that we did was on our undergraduate open day. We went on campus and spoke to people there. And that's something that our team does whenever we get the opportunity to, because there's just thousands of like prospective undergraduates milling around, killing time, and you can just sort of like pick them off and be like, here, come and talk to me for 2 seconds about this research. And so we spoke to people on that day. And again, it was a very similar thing. It was like a slightly more in-depth version, because we were at that point asking, okay, so which tools have you used, and like, what do you think about it, and how trustworthy is it? And then the other thing that we did is we created a survey that we circulated at a postgraduate online event. So at the end of this, we had a slide up with a QR code where they could scan it and they could fill out this survey. And we got a whole batch of responses from that, and that was really useful.
From what did you did that mirror what you'd found in the early stages of the project, or was it kind of something different?
It was different because it was postgraduates, and we found quite a distinct difference between undergrads and postgrads. So overall, we heard from 97 people across these various, interviews and open day and this online information event. And it was a pretty even split of undergrads and postgraduates. Overall, 38% said that they had used AI in searching for degrees for universities. But when you split that out into undergrad and postgrad, it was only 20% of undergrads, where it was 59% of postgrads had said that they had used it in the sort of university and degree search. And that's very interesting. And at first it was sort of like, I wonder why that's so different. But it sort of makes sense, because for, undergrads in the UK, it's a very supported journey applying for university. The school has a lot of input. Parents obviously have a lot of input. There are very established platforms like UCAS and like Unifrog and things like that these students are using to do their research and to sort of keep track of applications. Whereas for postgrads, it's a little bit more self-directed. And also postgraduate study is a bit more complicated, because there's all these sort of funding questions and there's all these different modes of study, and you might be wanting to work while you're studying. So you're working, okay, can I do part-time, and all these various things. So it kind of makes sense that there's a greater need for a more sort of detailed type of search query that kind of would go naturally more hand in hand with the Gen AI tool.
And you mentioned earlier about how, as well as looking at what people were putting into AI, you were thinking about what AI platforms were then sort of putting back out to people and how they
Yes.
ranked with people. Was this the point at which you started to look into that? And if so, like, how did you do it?
Yeah, I think I started doing that quite early in the process, initially just out of curiosity, because it sort of hadn't occurred to me until we started to sort of realize that people were actually using these tools. And so I just sort of, opened ChatGPT and put in like, what grades do I need to study history at Edinburgh, and see what it said. And that was pretty instantly a problem for us specifically, because I think I said earlier, we designed a sort of new degree program template, which is great. It's like a real improvement on what we had before. And one of the sort of shiny new tools on it is an entry requirements tool, which is where you select your country and you select your qualification type from 2 drop downs. And only once you've done that does this sort of information specific to those 2 criteria appear. And that's great for users because it's much more personalized and it really improves the experience. But it's terrible for AI tools because they can't crawl it, because it's like a dynamic element and the information isn't just there readily available on the page, it's sort of hidden. At sort of initially as well, when I started doing that stress testing, we also were in a period between between UCAS editions. So the new updated grades also weren't available on UCAS either. So when I was searching for I was using all these various Gen AI tools and asking them these questions about our grades, and none of them could return the right grades because they just sort of essentially didn't exist to them because the information couldn't be crawled on our site. And so that was very concerning immediately. And that became a thing that I kept testing throughout the year. And once the new UCAS edition went live, it was sort of okay because they could pull from that instead. They don't always do that reliably. But that was certainly the most concerning thing that I found.
Yeah. Did you do any sort of competitor analysis? Obviously not expecting you to name names, but is it sort of a common problem, across other kind of UK higher education institutes as well, that this kind of data isn't being pulled from?
I know that I definitely know some specific places that use a system like ours where it's personalized. So you select your country, you select your qualification type. And for anyone who's using that kind of tool, it's going to be the same problem. For any institution where they just list them on the page, that's not going to be a problem in the same way. But there are going to be other issues with misinformation that are related to other things. Like these tools, they like to draw from very random sources. It's one of the things that we found. And if you've got a really large web estate like ours, where you have lots of teams doing sort of similar overlapping things, and we've got lots of web pages on similar things. I think it's called cannibalization, right? So it's the AI tool gets a bit confused about, okay, which of these is the correct version, and presents one as the golden source, and that's not necessarily the one that they should be pulling from. So that's another problem that we came across during our testing, was that just due to the amount of content on our web estate, that it could be quite confusing to these Gen AI tools, trying to sort of sort through it all, essentially.
Yeah, I'm not really involved massively in the kind of prospective student journey. My role is sort of when students are already here, but we've noticed similar issues when we run really basic queries through ChatGPT, like how do I apply for mitigating circumstances in X school or Y or whatever. Yeah. And we've noticed the same thing, that the answers aren't always accurate, and they're being pulled from sometimes pages that we didn't necessarily know even existed anymore. We thought might have been deleted, but apparently are still there and have sort of outdated information on. So I think this problem of how people are using AI to kind of get queries answered, it encompasses a whole spectrum of the student journey. I think that is how people are going to get kind of clearer answers, I guess.
Yeah, and it does really shine a light on all the things that are wrong with your website, I think. There's an opportunity because you can say, okay, well, we're clearly not meeting these needs, and this isn't working. And it's especially not working when people are using these tools. So maybe this is an opportunity to go and have a look at what we've got on our website and maybe start deleting some stuff and maybe improving some stuff. Yeah.
So what did you find kind of prospective students were actually using these AI tools for? What were they doing with them?
So we found generally what people were using these tools for was to kind of compare programs, to kind of create listings. People spoke about using these tools as a kind of jumping off point, because when we asked people kind of what they felt about these tools, it was definitely a mixed bag. Lots of people just really didn't trust them at all and just said that the information's always wrong. But some people were like, it is actually quite good for some things, for kind of gathering information in that first instance. It's actually really useful. And for comparing, the word comparing came up quite a lot. And even if people felt that they were having to go back to the university website to kind of check things, to double check things, because they knew that it wasn't always going to be 100% correct, they still found that really useful. And then in this postgraduate online information event that we created a survey for, we kind of asked people to kind of select any tasks that they had used Gen AI for, and comparing programs was the top one. So that seemed like across the board, that was a really popular way to use it. They weren't necessarily going for give me a really detailed rundown of how I apply for this, but it would be okay, what are the 5 best unis in Scotland for nursing, for instance, and then they'd get that list and then they'd go away and work on that. And so that was kind of interesting to observe. It was that. They also, a lot of people said they were using it to look at entry requirements, which was a bit worrying given what we found. But comparing was the top one, yeah.
And so how did you guys use Google Analytics during the research?
So we used it, we looked at a few different things in GA4, and it is a little bit limited with this kind of thing. I mean, the main reason for that is that we obviously can't track everybody who's just putting in a search query about us into ChatGPT, because analytics for those things don't exist, right? Maybe they will one day, they just don't exist. So if someone goes on there and says, how do I get into Edinburgh for history? We don't know if they've done that. We only know if they've come through to our site. And even then, they have to accept our cookies for us to track them in GA4. So it's a little bit limited, but it did give us some good indications of things. And so we could track people coming to us from sort of separate AI tools. And then our performance analyst, Carla, she very cleverly sort of put them all into sort of one channel called AI tools. So then we could see sort of overall people who are coming from everything. So ChatGPT and Copilot and Perplexity and Claude and all of these various things, where they were sort of grouped together. And so we could see that it was a very small percentage of people who are being referred, but we could also see that that number was increasing. So I think in March of this year, we had about 200 referrals, and in August, we had like 1,300. So, it's interesting to see that. This is something obviously we kind of want to observe over a longer period, but I imagine that will increase. We also were interested in looking at pages that people visited when they were referred from AI. And we did see that they were going to kind of good pages on our site, sort of information rich ones like the main degree finder page and stuff like that. So that was encouraging. And we also looked sort of overall if we could see a kind of downward trend in traffic, because obviously a big concern is that the more people who are finding information through Gen AI, the less people are actually going to end up on your site. So we wanted to see if we could detect a sort of overall downward trend in traffic. And we didn't. We didn't see that when we compared it to last year. But again, you'd have to track that over a bit of a longer period. So that is going to be something that we'll continue to look at, I think. And there'll be more, we'll get more out of it the longer that we're looking at it.
So I mean, lots of kind of insight from the project. What are you guys going to do with the findings? Are you going to do anything differently in terms of your work? And what can other universities learn from what you've discovered?
I think we definitely want to use this research. And, like I was saying earlier, we want to sort of look for the opportunities that it offers. So our team, we're big proponents of centralizing and streamlining our web content. Our website is massive. And like I said, there's lots of repetition and duplication across it. And there's lots of opportunities to kind of streamline that and bring things centrally. And that will improve the applicant experience, regardless of whether people are using AI tools or not. But it will also just help, create better results for people who are using these AI tools. I think addressing the entry requirements issue is going to be top of our list. And exactly how we do that, I don't know, because I'm not a hugely technical person, but there are ways to address it. And there are more sort of things on the technical side that we might be able to do to sort of make our content appear in the way we want it to in these AI tool results, all to do with, structuring content and using schema markup and things like that. I think it would be interesting to kind of keep talking to our applicants as well, as much as we can, to kind of keep getting a sense of how they're using these tools and what they think about these tools, because it's likely to change over time. We spoke to these undergraduates who said, no, I don't use it and I don't trust it and things like that. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to use it in the future. And it's just a landscape that's changing all the time. So I think sort of checking in with people is going to be something we're going to want to do.
I completely agree. And this is a very random observation, but I was watching Educating Yorkshire on Channel 4 recently.
Yeah.
And there was an episode in that which was about Gen AI and about how, I think it was like a year 8 class. And one of the girls had used like Gen AI to write like an English language essay, I think. But then they were asking the kids, they were doing interviews with the kids afterwards. And they were asking them, like, these kids in year 7, they were like, what tools do you use? And they were listing these tools, like all the ones that like ChatGPT, Grok, Perplexity, Copilot, all this other stuff. Then they were listing loads that I'd never even heard of before. And they were saying things like, I used this in primary school, but now I use this. So I think it's interesting that you're talking about like how things might change, because the pace of change just in the way that AI, the capabilities of AI, so obviously huge, but also kind of more and more the age group of people who are applying to university are going to have more and more experience with AI as well. So it's just quite interesting that you're right, that it's just going to constantly kind of change, isn't it?
Totally. No, that's a really interesting point. And that was something that occurred to me when I was doing this research, because I came across this statistic that I think it was the Office for National Statistics had a report about it. And it was, can't remember the exact number, but there was a pretty significant percentage of 7 to 12-year-olds who were using Gen AI kind of, day to day. and apparently their favourite one was Snapchat, my AI.
Right. Okay. I didn't know
Which
that
was
had
funny.
AI in it. So
Yes, it does. It does. I downloaded it. I downloaded Snapchat on my phone for the first time in about 10 years to
right.
see what it was like. It's not very good. It's not very good, particularly for university search, but who would expect it to be? But it just shows you that, these are the people who are going to be potentially applying to us in the next 5 to 10 years. And if they're using these tools already, it's going to just be part of their lives and
Yeah.
part of how they kind
Yeah.
of discover things in the world and search for things. So we can't ignore that.
No, absolutely. And like I was saying earlier, not just at the point of applying to university, at the point at which they're then a student,
Yeah.
at the point at which they're then looking for grad jobs, I guess the whole search landscape will
Mm-hmm.
change in a way through AI and also through people using like video sites to kind of get answers to questions in a way that maybe I wouldn't have done a while back. So it's very interesting, isn't it? Very interesting.
It is very, very interesting. Yeah. And there's like so much more research that you could do. We really just scratched the surface here. And so, and if anyone's listening, I encourage you, go out, talk to people, like look at your analytics, do your own stress testing, because it's very interesting.
Cool. Well, thank you, Flo. It's been a really interesting conversation. And if people want to stay in touch with you, is LinkedIn the best place to kind of reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm Florence Vincent on there. I've got my full name on LinkedIn, or you can, find me at my university email, which is florence.vincent@ed.ac.uk.
Thank you so much for your time. It's a really interesting conversation.
Thanks for having me.